All right, so this is a basic code for baking geometry. This node right now could just replace the bake operation. This is already pretty powerful because there's no bake node within Grasshopper, right? Before, to make geometry, you always have to like select the geometry and go to this bake command. Now you can actually build the baking into your workflow itself. But that's not all we want. We want to bake the geometry, but we also want to assign it some properties, okay? So to do that, we actually need a reference to the new geometry or the new surface that was created. Here we're just kind of executing this function and it's creating that geometry. But what this function does is it creates that geometry but also passes back a reference to it. So if we just make a new variable, and we'll just call it Rhino object. Once the script creates a surface, it will pass back a reference to that surface. So now we can actually change the parameters of this object within Rhino by referencing this new parameter. Okay, so once we have that reference, we can do a lot of different things using the Rhino script syntax functions. And this is where we start to use what we found here. So if we want to change the object color, for instance, we can go into object, and here's object color. We click on this, it'll tell us the basic syntax for how to use that. Here you see Rhino script syntax dot. In our case, we've made a shortcut, so we can type rs dot and then object color. Okay, so we'll just try that out really quick. We'll say rs dot object color. And if you type in the function, you see if it recognizes the function, it turns this dark blue color. And you hit the open parentheses, it's going to actually give you a reference down here about what you need to give it as parameters. Here you see, in our case, we have this object color function, and we can pass it the object ID. So that's what we obtained here. And then we have the option of passing in a color. So what we'll do now is basically type in our object reference. So here's the surface that was just created. And now we're going to pass that surface into this function, and this function is going to change the color of that surface. And all the colors we want are in this color list. So we have color, it's a list. And then to access a specific color from the list, we again use this square bracket notation, and we'll pass in this I. So this I for us is right now keeping track of the index of each surface. So here we're using it to get the specific surface, and here we're using it to get the specific color. And then we close the parentheses. Okay, so what this does now is it'll bake the geometry, it'll give us a reference to that geometry, and it'll use this function to assign a unique color for that geometry from our list. If we hit OK, nothing will happen at first, but if we change this to true, you can see now rebuilding the surfaces. But what's happening is that every time, for 840 times, it's baking that geometry, and it's changing the color. So this will start to get slower and slower because it does more and more operations as it goes. All right, so once it's done, you can see here are our surfaces, and they were baked with the color that we got from Ecotect. This is still not completely what we want because this was the color specified for the display in Rhino, but it's not yet the material. So this is the same problem we had before where it'll display here. But if you go to your rendered preview, you see there's no material actually assigned to these surfaces. It's just the object's color in Rhino. Okay, so I'm going to set this to false so it doesn't create any more surfaces. I'm going to delete these surfaces. So, but that's the basic setup. You know, once we have this Rhino object, once we have this variable referencing the geometry in Rhino, we can do any number of things to that geometry. The one easy thing we can do is change the color, but we can also start messing with the object's materials, so we can actually render out those colors. And to do that, again, I found these references in this document by going to material and looking at all the options. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to first assign a material to an object, and then I'm going to change that material's color. All right, so I can't just automatically change the color. The way the materials work in Rhino is there's a set number of materials, and those have their own properties. So first I have to assign a material to the object, and then I have to change the color of that material. So the first thing I'll do is assign a new material to each surface. So I'll do rs, and the function is add material to object. And again, once it recognizes that function, it'll give us some help with what we need to give it. And here we just need to pass it the object ID. And this is the same ID we had before. Just say Rhino object. So this function will add a material to this object. But to change the color of the material, we again need a reference to that material. So what this function will do, you can see in the description here, it's going to add the material to the object, and it's going to return the new materials index. Okay? And that index is what we'll use to change the color of the material. So to get that output, we create a new variable called material ID, mat ID, equals. So this function will execute, it will assign the material to the object, and it will give us that ID into this variable. Once we have that ID, we can execute the second function to actually assign the material color. We say Rhino script syntax rs dot material color, and here you see that what it needs is a material index, so we have that here, mat ID, and then the color, and again the color is in this color array, so color I. Okay, so again it's the same setup, it's just executing a few more functions to basically do what we want to our geometry. First it's going to assign a new material to the object, and then it's going to assign a color to that material. So we'll hit OK, and we'll toggle this to true, and it's going to rebuild all of our surfaces one more time, but this time, every time it creates a surface, it not only changes the display color, but also assigns a new material to it and changes the color of that material to match the colors coming from Ecotect. So here, once the surfaces have been created, if we go to our render display, you can see that now those are actual materials. If we click on one of these objects, we can go to the material properties. Here you can see that the material is now assigned by object. It's this one of these unnamed objects that were created through the script, and all of them now have their own color. All right, and now we have that. We can hit render, and it's going to render out our actual colors. Okay. So like I was saying before, you can use this node now as a tool. You know, like you can load this file up into any of your Grasshopper definition. This is already set up. You can pass in any geometry as a list. You can pass in a list of colors as long as the amounts of materials and colors match. This will bake out your geometry and allow you to render the analysis. Okay, so it's already a tool that you don't have to access any of the code. It's going to work. But I also wanted to use this opportunity to give you a very quick overview of what scripting is in Grasshopper and how it can be used to extend the functionality of Grasshopper.